Hi, my name is Aoife Healy and I'm the chair of the Ireland-Portugal Business Network. I apologise for the brief delay in introducing us today to you, but it was technical issues as usual. Anyway, I'm very pleased to welcome you here to our first event after the summer and post-pandemic. We had hoped to have about 35 of you here in person, but the ongoing changes in guidance for people gathering together has changed too dramatically for us to risk running events with people in person. Anyway, today's event is focused on the small to medium enterprise sector, and I have three very important guests, all board members of the Ireland-Portugal Business Network, here to share with me their thoughts today on workspace, cash, financial management and the legal issues around returning to work and working into the future. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Graham, Senior Partner with Edge International Lawyers, Pedro Teixeira, Managing Partner of Tax Libris Accountants and Financial Consultants, and Susan Cabeceres of Conceptness Architecture. And today we're going to start talking about workspaces. Susan, you have an architectural practice and you would see some of the most impact of workspaces being affected by the pandemic. Can you give us an outline of what the current guidelines are on reducing virus transmission and creating safe workplaces?
Yes, of course. Thank you for the invitation to be here today. The first stage that happened in the workspaces was the quick adaptation to COVID. Because the first stage was send everyone home to understand what's going to happen. Then sometimes in 2 or 3 days, people return, but 20%, 40%, depending on the needs and the risks, because we have some owners of businesses that are 60, 70, and when they're 30 or they're 60, we have to see a plan. The risks are bigger, and we have to protect everyone. So all of our clients were concerned about it. But another stage is technology. Are ours prepared or not? Our business has servers for that. Do we have the firewalls? Do we have all technology? And nowadays, this stage now that we are planning with clients is we have to change the way people work. And we are doing it creatively, with technology, innovative. So all of this is open. It's really challenging, but I think we're opening a really nice stage to people think space is a different way, and a lot of things are happening. Nowadays, people don't want just desks. They want places to people to be together, to talk, to do brainstorming, and to feel as a team again, because most of people, when we talk with them, they say, I'm feeling alone. Though this is a stage we're feeling that we have to, as leaders, to manage our teams, and the space is really important for that.
And Pedro, what challenges did you face in maintaining your team remotely over the last 6 months or so?
Well, first of all, let's say on the logistic point of view, we have to make a move in 24 hours, like many people. Fortunately, we had a lack to have the infrastructure, the IT prepared for that purpose. But of course, I think the main challenge on all this was not really to move people or to get it remotely or to have the infrastructure, but also to keep the people motivated, to have, let's say, the tools to motivate people, to make the planning. Just an example, we used to do weekly planning meetings with the whole team. And this has to start to be done in a remote way, but in a way that people get motivated, gets the follow-up and the support from the back office that they need, and so on. So that's exactly the challenge. And a lot of, let's say, IT additional tools have to be implemented for that purpose. So on time, of course, we start to move back to the office, like Susan was saying, 20%, 50%, something very similar. And I believe that people really get excited with that, so that's very motivating. It means that we are really social human beings and not just robots, I would say.
And Jeffrey, you have one of the larger employers, you have 50 people employed. Has this forced you to rethink the way you work personally and your office and team work?
Absolutely, Aoife. I think that ultimately our first and primary concern was security, really. It's obviously as a legal business, that's one of your prime concerns anyway. But we had to make sure, as Pedro and Susan both alluded to, that you have the right firewalls and cybersecurity in place in order to make sure that new platforms that you're introducing, digital platforms, and to communicate are in fact secure. But I think really, looking at things very positively, I'm kind of, maybe amazed is the wrong word, but it's certainly to be noted how people evolved quite quickly with a very quickly changing landscape. I mean, when you think back to lockdown itself, I mean, we were all conscious of the fact that legislation was coming out practically daily. So we were having to be very, very reactive into the way that we adapted to the new environment. And of course, security and health became paramount in the workplace as well. And therefore, we had to adapt our workspace when we started thinking about people coming back. And we now have, similar to both Pedro and Susan, a blended approach to both physical and remote working. That meant basically making common areas secure, for example, the reception area. Although it's very, I don't know, it's a social obstacle to have a perspex sort of glass in front of you. But at the same time, that was necessary for the purpose of protecting the reception staff. Also insisting and ensuring that masks were readily available for any visitors to the office, and social distancing was observed. And even as something as simple as observing the regulations regarding regular cleaning of the workspace, that can affect the way that you actually organize your workspace. So I think that we were able to evolve, adapt, but still we're presented with challenges. And I think the primary challenges already alluded to is actually maintaining that social contact, which is fundamental to the way that we do business. We may be autonomous ourselves in the way that we do business because we're senior, but certainly for the people, for example, we mentor, I think it's fundamental that we have that social interaction, which I know, Susan, you've done quite a lot of work on with companies.
Yes, we did. We had some challenges with the client that they want to still receive interns to come to the space, but they know they have to maintain the safety of their workers. So to put everyone together, they have to know they have a space for each person. So to receive clients, you have certain rules. To have interns, you have different rules, because we have to think on something. If I'm working, I want to have a work now, the most things the owners say is, I'm not going to have interns because this is a risk. No, we have to go on. Things have to go on. So what we think is, if everything and all the areas are thinked for that, people can be social, but still be together on different times. If I have a desk, I can have a desk for two of my workers, because they once come 1 week, the other come another week. So I have 50% of the space for the desks I don't need. I can use that space for team buildings, for meetings, for technology, for different meetings, and all of that makes spaces different. That's why if people go around and think about how they can be usual, and the creativity, it doesn't work when people are alone home on a computer. People have to be together to feel the places, to feel that is different. They have to be cozy. Nowadays, it's more important as owners that when I go to office, I have an experience. I'm not just in front of a computer. And if owners think about that, the spaces are different and all the areas are becoming different. And it's not only technology, it's all together. That's why it's so challenging and so interesting that we were for so many years saying to clients, let's make a nice place, let's make an area for social meetings. No, desks. That's not the timing, that's not the thinking nowadays. So it's really interesting how we were predicting that this could be what happened, but it's happening now. So this is the good part of all this. People are having fun when they go to office because they have to be motivated, they want to go there. And we had, on our team in Conceptness, we had the two people. I remember the 11th of March, we had people that they wanted to go home right away, and the others saying, I don't go, I want to stay here, I'm safe here. So it's so interesting how you have the two kind of people, and we have to create spaces for that two kind of people, and this one's to make safe, and others don't have contact, because in the first moment you look to the window and you see your team all together and you have to make them apart. So this is challenging every day, and it's so nice to see the layout of an office space and try to see if it's going to work or not. So that's what architects and engineers are doing together, because if we do it just an architect, the engineering is not going to work. So it's really interesting how the team works together. So now, today, I understand that was really the way we do projects, the way that we think spaces. It's really innovative, it's really challenging, and thank God we are an architect and we have a lot of fun doing it. Thank you.
And Jeffrey, I mean, we were trying to focus this on very positive aspects of running your business and how pulling teams together remotely works. But in the rather horrible circumstances that someone is not pulling their weight remotely, what are the options available to the employer to remedy that?
think fundamentally there has to be a system which has been put into place for monitoring the employee, whereby effectively there is a feedback and a regular feedback between employer and employee, between team leader and team member. Certainly if a team leader feels that a remote worker isn't pulling their weight, therefore they have to become a little bit more micromanaged. Whilst that's more work obviously for the team leader, that's just part of the job at the end of the day. And I have to say, one of the fundamental things which I found managing a team remotely was that I was spending a lot more time on management. And actually, then I started asking myself the question, in fact, was I spending too little time on management beforehand? Because people do need mentored, they need basically to feel that they're making a contribution to the firm. And therefore, you've got to diagnose those problems early. And I'm a great believer that if you diagnose it, you can diagnose those problems through communication. However, there are also risks associated for an employer because of potential liability issues surrounding workspace. If somebody who's remote working has not got a suitably adapted workspace at home, they can suffer spinal injuries, they can repetitive strain injury, for example, and therefore, who's liable for that? That's something which employers have to be very sensitive about. And I think, I suppose finally, when you're looking at that worst case scenario, which is a disciplinary action, it's more difficult because ultimately that person is a remote worker and therefore you need to have sufficient evidence to show that that person has not actually been fulfilling their role and is in fact in breach of contract. Because that's really what it is. The origin of a disciplinary process is that they are in breach of contract and they're not fulfilling the duties that they should fulfill under their contract. So it is very much an evolving space, I think, for employers, because ultimately when you're running a business, it's about productivity. And if someone is not contributing to that productivity, not only for that individual, but actually for the rest of the employees, they've got to see that there's a mechanism in place in order to deal with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully all of our IPBN members have stellar staff who would never dream of abusing their position. Yeah. That brings me, Pedro, I think to one of the crucial issues that every business is facing at the moment, and that's cash flow and cash management. You wanted to share a few thoughts with us today on particularly the idea that cash is king, and start us off here.
Yes, cash is king, you're right, like US and the Americans say. Well, I think in this situation we should adopt what I call a war economy, in fact, because this is exactly what happened after the First and Second World War. Not on the countries that were destroyed, but the others that were involved in the war, but although outside war, like US, for instance. So you should focus on your cash management in very short term. I would say you have to follow up your cash in a weekly basis. Of course, you should have a cash forecast also in the short term, 3-6 months. But you should have, in fact, a review of your cash almost in a weekly basis at this stage. The point that you have to look into your cash flow in the very short term doesn't mean that you don't need to have a longer view of your cash flow, because there's a lot of measures being taken by companies. Geoffrey just mentioned a few minutes ago about all the layoffs, options, measures, and also the loans the deferred taxes, and so on. Those measures will have an impact on the very short term, I would say 6 months, 1 year, impact on your cash management, cash flow. So it's not sufficient to have a very short view of it. You need to have a very short view, of course, because we have to save, we have to be resilient right now. But you should also have a view on the, I would say, immediate future. What is immediate future? 6 months, 1 year, in order to accomplish, let's say, a cash management that also can fit all the coming, let's say, liabilities that you'll have in very short term. So, in fact, you should have a very short-term view, you should have a medium-term view, and you cannot forget your fundamentals. I mean, it doesn't matter that you have control on your cash flow if your economic fundamentals are in bad shape, because that will have an impact in the short term in your cash, for sure. And that's the reason, as I mentioned many times, that many companies that are facing very difficult times right now, most of them they're coming from the past already with wrong fundamentals or with problems on their structure, cost structure, and so on, and profitability in general. So right now, even the companies that were profitable, that were in good shape, and now they are facing a short-term cash flow problem, they cannot forget also your economical fundamentals, and that's key. It's very important to look to your short-term cash flow, but it's also important to keep fundamentals under control, I would say.
And Jeffrey, the government of Portugal introduced substantial support to help employers through this crisis, and they've changed and adapted as time goes by. You introduced the early ones in April this year, but how have they updated since then?
Yeah, I think it is worth sort of contextualizing by a short reference to the layoff regime itself, which really it wasn't something which was granted to every single company which applied for it. They're basically it applied to companies which were forced to close due to legislation. They had companies which had a drastic reduction in sales, for example, and also because of the fact that they had no supplies or no supplies or no contracts. Therefore, the regime itself, I think, worked quite well, and a monthly application had to be made in order to support 2/3 of the employee's salary, and then 70% of that would be paid by the Social Security, and then 30% by the employer. So I think that is quite a significant support which the Portuguese government was offering. And then it was extended, the regime, until July. Important thing to note is the fact there couldn't be any dismissals within 90 days after the termination of the regime. So the whole idea was really to protect those employees who benefited under the program itself. And actually a statistic which is interesting is the fact that almost 1 million employment contracts benefited under this particular program itself. And it worked very well in the sense that certainly the clients who we speak to, they were receiving the payments within 3 to 4 weeks. And therefore it was a very positive feedback. That evolved into Retoma Progressiva, which is the Progressive Recovery program. And really the layoff program or furlough program laid the foundation and fundamentals for that program itself. However, it's not quite as far-reaching because the big difference is that there will be a minimum number of hours per week. In some case, 50% of the working hours, in others at least 30%. So those hours are paid in full by the employer, and then the remaining salary would be funded 70% by Social Security and 30% by the employer. So I think it was an extension of the existing program itself, and it meant that there was further support for companies which were coming out of the furlough or layoff regime itself. Of course, there were other solutions which were offered as well, other solutions being a payment of 1 or 2 minimum wages per employee or employment contract. And however, in the case of the 2 minimum wages which companies chose to pay or opt for, they would have to actually keep the contracts in question for at least 8 months. So again, the feedback that we're getting from clients is that rather than paying 1, 2 minimum salaries, and also in terms of the cash flow and in terms of the assistance that they're obtaining from government, that they would tend to go for the Progressive Recovery Program. Again, it seems to be working well in terms of the payments which are being made, and therefore it's been a fundamental support for employers and employees during this particular phase and challenging phase. I suppose one of the other areas which clients would have looked at is whether they can outsource, but again, they weren't necessarily, wasn't a preferential solution because if, for example, they had a certain area of work which was being performed by an in-house department, very much the question they would have to ask themselves is, okay, it may be more cost effective to outsource that, but actually is that going to affect the productivity of that particular department, or is it going to affect the way it interacts with the rest of the business? So fundamental questions are being asked by employers at the moment, and I think that that can be a positive thing because, you know, as Pedro has said, that, you know, there may well be lessons, and I'm sure you're seeing lessons which your clients are learning from the fact is that they already have a healthy existing business model, but ultimately what they're seeing through the measures they're having to adopt is they're having to maybe rationalize a little bit, but they're also having to increase productivity or try to find a way to increase productivity and rationalize costs. So, yeah.
That's the second stage.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think that brings us on to restructuring costs, Pedro. I mean, virtually every business has had to find some way to restructure to get through this, whether it's their workspaces or their staffing. And obviously restructuring has quite serious financial implications. You have some thoughts to share with us on that?
Yes, as Geoffrey is saying, in fact, and that's exactly the second stage, you have to look to this crisis, or any crisis in fact, and to make your own plans to prepare your business for the future status. We know that this crisis doesn't be recovered in very short term, so we need to prepare the business for the future situation. And when you look to cost restructuring, people are always thinking about, personnel cuts, costs, and all these kind of things. But in fact, you need to look to your process in general. No, of course, if you are in the situation like the current one, that everybody is saying that this is not possible to estimate where we'll be in 1 year or 2 years, so it's very difficult to plan, it's very difficult to make any kind of cost restructuring plan. That's a myth. I mean, we should build a few scenarios, like in any crisis, in any situation. Life is unpredictable, we know that. It's not just this crisis, it's in general, life is dangerous, as we used to say. You can perfectly define a couple of scenarios. You should always have a worst case scenario. And my advice in general is to work for the worst case scenario. You should build up your future structure, a company structure, for the worst case scenario. If by any case you can do better than that, fantastic. But at least you are in a safer situation if you prepare your cost structure for the worst case scenario. Now, if you ask me what kind of cost restructuring you should do, well, that depends a lot of the activity. So I think each one of the businessmen, of the entrepreneurs, know exactly what are the fundamentals of their business model and where they should adopt measures to improve productivity. But in fact, the point is, in this case, you should go backwards. You should define what I will be or how I should be organized in a way to accomplish the future potential of my business. So the worst case scenario, let's say it again, and go backwards and say what structure I can really pay. That's the reality, and work on that. So we'll talk later on about some measures that we can take, like the digital transformation, for instance. But a part of that, we should look to the company as a whole. The whole activity should be addressed and analyzed in a way that you should have a structure adapt to the new situation.
And Susan, we were talking before this about, and you mentioned it, so I bring it up now, is how some of your clients in particular, I mean, leasing costs, rental costs, and building costs in general are huge. Some of your clients have come up with particularly innovative solutions for generating cash out of their properties.
Yes, this is something that happened already in 2010 when you had the crisis, that we have to take our real estate, take our buildings and rethinking. We have to rethink how to use it. If I need 2 floors of workspaces, I don't need it anymore. Why don't do a co-working that I can share my internet, I can share my administrative, I can share my phone bill, but that way I can have income. So if I don't need all that space, I can make sharing. I talk about the workspace, I can talk about a warehouse. Do I need all this area to make storage? Maybe not. Maybe I can partnership with others. We were talking on the briefing on the beginning that is it really interesting how the partnerships are important. Sometimes my clients now have other needs. My partners now have other needs. Yesterday I was talking with a finance partner that we have an agriculture client that was asking us to be a team together. And I said, really interesting, do you need an office? I have extra space. I didn't do that 1 year ago because we were full of work and full of a team inside. But now we have extra space, come here. You have a really cozy and comfortable office. We can work together and it will work easier, of course, with all the distance. So nowadays we have to be rethinking the spaces, rethinking the areas, but not as a cost thing, but as a future and the networking. Because if I have 4 partners related to my areas that can bring clients and I can give clients to them, this is the future. We have to make hands together and work together on these team buildings all together, because 1 head, 2 heads, 3 heads together, if we are entrepreneurs and we know how to rethink this, it will help a lot. Don't think about today, think about the next 3 months, 6 months, as Pedro was saying, because if you have the space empty, think about it, do something, ask us help, ask us, your architects, your team, what we can do with that. And I passed some weeks going around the country with my clients saying, what am I going to do with this place? Sometimes they're not thinking about it, but I'm already thinking, because I know it's empty, nothing is happening there. So they are so stressed with the costs and with the nowadays, and if my team is okay, and it's really important. And we are just updating, saying in 3 months you're going to make a change. We have here a really nice project we're doing for another client. Don't you think you can update? Because we already know them for 10 years. So we already know what the risks are and what the needs are. So we have to rethink real estate and all the effort we have. And if we are a company that invests on the past, we are strong now. If we are a company that only worked by day basis, money come in, money come out, it's going to be really hard. And we see really small restaurants, really small shops that when we talk, they don't pick the phone because it's really hard. I had a client that was investing in 3 restaurants, one in Braga, they're from Porto, and they were investing in Lisbon. I just passed with the car by the office, I went to Braga, one client, and I passed on the front of the place that I was checking to give a price for the project, and it's closed. So it's hard when you are a day basis. We have to work, we have to plan, and we have to see what we do today to have systems to make people work away, but technology has to be inside our places. So if we can share our technology, our server, everything we have with others, let's get some income. It's small, but it's good, makes things happen. I think movement is the moment to us to, if we are strong and if we are all together, we have to give others to believe that things can happen, and the workspace is really, really important to be nice to us to be together.
There's important legal considerations to leases and to restructuring costs in terms of employees and stuff. What are the principal things that people need to be fairly careful about, Jeffrey?
I think in the current environment, certainly the restrictions on the back of the layoff or furlough program, together with the minimum wage program, which can be 90 days or 8 months, whereby employment contracts are guaranteed. Thereafter, I think that there has to become a process of dialogue between employer and employee. Certainly something which our clients have to consider. And they have to really take a legal diagnosis as to, for example, if I'm moving this individual who's had X years of service with me to part-time, what sort of compensation, if any, is going to be payable, and what sort of negotiating mechanism should I be using in order to adapt that contract. And certainly when it comes to termination of contracts as well, doomsday scenario, not something that anyone really wants to think about. There are certain compensations that have to be paid as well. So these are all a diagnosis that has to be undertaken, a legal diagnosis, whether that be in-house or using an external lawyer, in order to see how much it's actually going to cost in order to undertake this restructuring. A very important one, because it's a bit like managing your cash as well. You've got to be managing how much payout you're going to have to be making moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And that brings us back to the digital transformation of processes and people and everything. Pedro, you had some ideas about how people will have to prepare for this, for their finances, the financial aspects of preparing for the future through digital transformation. Did you want to take us through what your ideas were?
Yeah, but if you allow me, give me just 1 second
Sure.
to go back to the previous discussion, because what Susan mentioned is very important. We are always looking to cost restructuring in this crisis situation, but look also to your revenue streams, because the P&L has 2 sides, as the revenues and the costs. So with partnership, you can perfectly find out new revenue streams, partnering with some other business and together making a whole new product or a new service, or a combine you had value to the market. This kind of thing, you should look into it also. Just this remark, because I think it's important to look to both sides, in my opinion. going to the digital transformation topic, well, I think most of the people when talk about digital and digital transformation, there's always a view, a wrong view in my opinion about, let's say, the visible part of it, which is normally what people see on your organization as a digital organization. You know, you have a nice website, you have really fantastic digital marketing and these kind of actions. But in fact, digital transformation is related with your internal, the transformation of our internal process, your production process, your activity process inside the company, depending of your sector, of course. But the fact that you should invest in solutions, in tools, in let's say activities that can improve your automation, can improve your productivity as a whole. Applying the digital tools that are available more and more in the market, the robotization, all that. And I'm not talking about the robots itself, hardware, I'm talking about software robots, these kind of things that are very useful nowadays in all kind of administration. Also on the legal side, people say that in 10 years, half of the legal tasks will be also robotized. So the same story on financial accounting, for instance, can be totally robotized. So just to say that you should invest on your internal infrastructure right now and not in 1 year, because in 1 year, let's say the big, let's say, impact of this crisis at the management point of view is the fact that we are anticipating 10 years a lot of things. This will happen in 10 years for sure, but now we are anticipating. And the companies or the business that are able to be faster on this digital transformation, for sure will be the ones that will survive on the long term. So although it could be, or it is, no doubt about it, a big effort right now to do any kind of investment in this kind of tools. And for that purpose, I really suggest to look for support, and there's a lot of governmental loans, support loans nowadays with government guarantees and so on. And for this kind of investment that for sure will give you a future productivity, it's also a way to restructure your costs. In fact, it's a way not only to restructure your costs on the long term, but also a way to be, let's say, prepared for the future. So digital transformation should be analyzed on this perspective and not just, you know, the fashion side of the digital transformation. No, it's you know, it's a step by step, baby steps that you have to take in your organization to improve your process internally, applying this kind of digital tools.
Mm-hmm. And Susan, your business in particular had a digital transformation. I mean, the architecture practice have left paper way behind years ago. But you in particular have been very forward looking at your digital transformation. How has the return on that investment paid off for you?
It's interesting because we are struggling in the market, in construction market, that BIM, building information modeling, is the future, and Portugal was the most past. So every Europe and every countries from North America are investing in BIM for 25 years. And Portugal was just going after it, but not going for it. What happened is BIM makes sharing. Can be 20 people on the same time working on the same project. And with this need of the pandemic, we had to put our teams home, working with the good servers, with the good technology. And if we didn't do that investment 2 years ago, we will be really hard now. So whatever you invest, and it's a jump like an opposite way. First, you have to have architects and a team trained. First, you have to train them to this change of technology. But who doesn't do it now, it's going to die in the next 6 months or 1 year, because our clients, Portuguese and international clients, they ask to us, do you work on BIM? Because they know it's really quicker. They know 40% of the risk is taken off when you work with paper and projects on paper or you work on BIM. Because my client can see what's happening in the project, the construction guy can see what's happening in the project, my managing team, architects, engineers all together can see what's happening in the project. What Open Door this does, I can do a project here, I can do a project for China, I can do a project for whatever. So who doesn't invest on this moment and has this vision, it's gonna die. It's what the difference between an architect was drawing by hand when I started the university, that was happening. Nowadays, if you don't work in BIM and technology changes, the teams will die. So that's why I'm saying this is the moment that some people are with less work in our team. You have to train them to be doing other skills. Another thing really interesting that Jeffrey was talking about is if we have 20 people on our team and for law, we have to stay with them because of the layoff rules, make them do something else. Your clients have other needs, train them to do other things. So you have to have this team all working together, not as just an architect, no, as an engineer, no. What is the need of the client? You guys have to get for it. I usually say, Google it, YouTube it, you will get it. So everything is on our hands. It's all digital. We just need to have the right way and the right place to take information. And thank God this new generation that is coming from universities, that we have to give opportunity to them to be together. Because this is another challenge we were talking on the beginning is, who is coming from the university and the juniors that you hire today, how are you going to pass them the culture of the company? This is a big challenge. We will speak in 6 months later. And what I think is you have to bring them to the team. We have just an intern that started 2 weeks ago. I said to her, you're not home, you're here with us. And today you are with this architect, tomorrow you are with the other. You have to get the culture. Because if I don't give the culture to this new person that is on the team, you're going to lose the managing of your team. You need to know if your seniors are okay, but you need to introduce this one to the team and not to be struggling. We have to see that is positive to bring that person. So digital changes is really important on all culture. About our clients, I can add something really interesting is that nowadays we think about spaces. For example, some of our clients that create product, they want a creative area for the team to be together. But they don't want the team to touch anything. They enter the room, the light gets on, and we need architects and engineers, electricity engineers, IT engineers all together. And all of this makes everything happen. So it's not now, it's not just today. We have to think long term. We have to plan this, get the costs. And if you are prepared with a plan now, if you get your buildings ready for it, if you have the project ready, in January, February, where you have the investments of the government, you are ready for it. If you wait for the investment of government that some clients of us are saying, Susan, in January we go back, I said, it's going to be late. Because this is the moment to think about the layout and your needs, because time is passing really quick. So don't stop. Go for it and try to get the right people around to help you on your technology changes and the systems that's going to give you more efficiency. Because on the past we needed 50, now we need 20 on the team. So we have to take care of the others that are not doing this and to get adapted to it and plan this on the cost. It's always the cost, because with no money, we don't get anywhere, but if we plan it, we'll do for it.
Jeffrey, both Susan and Pedro have been talking about the collaborative impact of the digital transformation. How is that going to manifest itself in the legal profession?
Before I come to that, Aoife, I'd just like to come back to a couple of things that Pedro and Susan said, and I think a couple of very important elements. First of all, look at the revenue. See how you can not just be focused on rationalization, but actually a little bit of investment in your business as well. I know that that's a difficult word right now, but the thing is, I'm talking about investment. Susan, you were talking about retraining. All of those tools which are available online, digitalization can help us in order to retrain our staff. But I think what was also very interesting, what you said, is that there's something intrinsic about being human beings, in the fact that in order to pass culture, there needs to be a type of sharing of space with somebody, and sharing of space with a mentor, being mentored as well, in order to develop that culture, to instill that culture, which identifies your firm, each one of your firms, from other firms. So I think as lawyers, we're, I suppose, confronted with a couple of challenges, which maybe other professions aren't, in the sense that we are up against, for example, quite a deed-based system whereby effectively in order to transact, in order to effect certain transactions, it's necessary to do that before a public notary, a lawyer, etc. And that's something, interestingly, however, that was being permitted during the lockdown. Certain deeds were being allowed still to happen so that transactions could continue to happen. However, I think that we can also learn from lawyers around the world and legal professions around the world. Rio Tinto, for example, they actually engaged with their clients, legal department, They re-engage with they're engaged with their clients, most of whom were Chinese, used WeChat, and they developed an app off WeChat through which they were able to evolve and restructure the way they interacted with their clients. So I think that's a demonstration of how we can actually be at the forefront of technology as opposed to be at the back of the line. So I think that, and in a way, because we do have certain things that are still restricted to paper, although again, I have to say there was a Council of Ministers decision which was approved, which is yet to be legislated, which would allow for effectively virtual powers of attorney, whereby a notary or a legal executive or a lawyer can actually execute a power of attorney through a digital platform. And that's pretty innovative. So I think that, yes, we can adapt with technology as well. We can use technology, and we can be a little bit of a forefront of technology as well, because I strongly believe that lawyers can work with clients in order to find efficient and digital based solutions, which are going to be effectively make everything more efficient and actually being able to do business in a more effective way.
Susan, anything to add?
No, I think it's interesting. We were talking about the way that courts and everyone is getting adapted to. Something is really interesting on the beginning of the pandemic, March, April. If you go to the municipality, nobody will answer for you. Nowadays, if you make an appointment, you have an answer. So it's interesting how the government and all the entities, even home, most of the people are home. We had a situation here in Lisbon, in municipality of Lisbon, and what happened is the people are home, but things are happening. And I have answers from people from municipalities by midnight. Never happened on the past. They didn't even pick the phone. So it's interesting how people are making things happen from the other sides. We have the both sides. We have things are not efficient, not so fast on the government side, but also some answers when they come, it's like, I was not expecting this, because we were expecting everything to be stopped. And I think Portugal is getting really adapted to all of this. And of course, it's not the quickest as we want, but step by step, things are moving because Portugal was adapted to technology. We were one of the countries that had internet quicker, more faster. And we were already expecting that something could happen. And the more we are prepared by technology, and something I think is important to say today is, technology is not the way, it's just the tool to us to get to something. Because if we start just investing in technology, we're gonna get lost and we lose the money. Not that. We have to do a really good plan to things to work. We were talking about technology and the challenge we have on the beginning. So some softwares are good, sometimes some others are not. They have to be ready for that. So all of this has to be think as a one thing. And another thing I want to leave by the last idea for retailing, for example, is a challenge. Some clients just think about closing shops. And I say to them, make your client have a different experience. When I go to buy a car, nowadays I do ROPO. We talk about this in marketing. I research online and research offline. But when I go research offline, I have to have a huge, amazing experience. Is the smell, is the 5 senses around? Because if I just go there to pick the car, it's just a car. You understand? So whatever our team goes to office and has an experience, when I go to a shop to buy a dress or to buy shoes, I need to have a different experience. This is a challenge I do to retail and investors, that when we do something, we have to do it differently. About the coffee, when I enter a coffee shop, I have to have another feeling, not just to go there and grab a coffee. I'm not enter there, it's a risk. So someone has to be expecting to me, another person has to explain to me what the experience of the coffee is, and I need to know what I'm drinking and why I'm drinking it. It's all about the senses, because nowadays I just stay home safer. I will go outside. All information is online. So when I talk with clients, we have, on this moment, you have two kind of investors. We have the clients that are investing in marketing, a little bit of show off, but really on the right way. So I need to make my clients to feel different on this. I'm not going to have 20 shops. I have really good 5 shops that are bigger, but with different places. And then I have the others that are just closing and people are going to forget about them. So to the great trademarks, they are investing on the right places to have the return later. So Apple was closing shops, Microsoft was closing some shops, but they're going to open different shops. Believe me, they're not going to stay with the shops closed. They're going to do experience things. We have to enter, and everything is waiting for me. That's the main thing in everything we do nowadays with the project. We have to do with the marketing, with the finance, with the construction guy, all together, engineers, because we have to think about the environment as a special place to do the experience. That's what I feel today.
And as Gossaguan,
I just wanted to come back to actually because you mentioned about the courts, Susan, and also because there have been digital hearings which have used digital platforms, but also public service. And I think the public service itself, whether it be a tax department or social security, they have been able to adapt using technology to the lockdown and eventually deconfinement. Sometimes we find that tasks, we do get those emails at strange times of the night. So there are certain people who've been more engaged by the process actually. Ultimately, there are certain elements of the process which are faster, but I have to also paint a realistic picture. And I have to say that, for something as simple as obtaining a tax number, a non-resident tax number for an individual might have taken 48 hours. Now you're looking at 2 weeks. But again, we can manage expectations. As long as the expectations of the clients who are investing in this country, if they are investing from outside, are managed, that's where our role as professionals is incredibly important. That, it's not an insurmountable barrier. So I don't know if you...
It also proves that you have to invest now on this digital transformation, because if you look to the public sector, in fact, they start to do this investment a few years ago, and let's say that this mood or this trend, this airline was already there. Now, of course, they have to continue to invest on it, but in fact, if they didn't start to do it some time ago, this process was impossible to carry on right now. So digital transformation or investments on digital tools, it's not a short-term, there's no short-term payback. It's a long-term investment. You have to be conscious of that. So, but probably you are on the right moment to do it, thinking about the future, of course. But the public sector, in fact, is one of them that really need to continue to invest it. Although I have to say the example that you just gave about the tax number is true, but if you compare what is going on with the Spanish tax services, with the pandemic situation, we are not that bad with the 2 weeks time.
I completely agree with you, Pedro. I mean, we were potentially looking at, certainly wasn't a lockdown at all.
Yes, of course.
When we first embarked on this process, that was the fear.
Right, exactly.
But in fact, what we were seeing, and I know this is moving a little bit on to the next section really, we were seeing that investment or interest in Portugal was continuing. And that we were able to, I suppose, continue to feed that interest by implementing processes which would try to engage the client as quickly as possible.
Well, we'll stick with you then for this one, Jeffrey, because you are talking about inward investment, which is a very positive thing from the Portuguese perspective. You're a full-service law firm, but you have a lot of international clients. What way are they viewing the Portuguese market at the moment, and what are the opportunities for international investors and companies looking to start in Portugal?
I strongly believe that this is a massive opportunity for Portugal, where we are right now, simply because I think that business leaders are looking at the way that they conduct business. They're looking at the way they conduct their private lives. They are considering whether they are living their quality of life. They are considering digitalization and putting a lot of what they do, whilst human contact is still fundamental. If future lockdowns, God forbid, were to occur, then you have a restriction anyway on air travel. So this is really a time whereby Portugal can really, I think, make hay, because Portugal has a lot of DNA which makes it an attractive place to invest and to live. So what we're seeing is that top executives, high net worth individuals are looking at Portugal as a place in order to invest, number one, and number two, in order to live. Invest from a perspective of, for example, looking at the UK, somewhere in order to keep a foothold in Europe, looking globally, using Portugal's well-earned reputation as a startup hub. And one of the things which is maybe not largely reported is the whole raft of, to the tune of 27.6 million incentives which were brought into place for startups during COVID. And therefore, I think that it is very much something to engage international investment by using the DNA which Portugal has. And I think what's interesting also about the programs that it has, is that those programs, they may start with an individual investment, but if you are attracting chiefs, heads of industry, if you're attracting top executives to Portugal, you're also spreading the word to their networks. And they have close networks, and Portugal, therefore, has been able to have an even greater reach globally than it did previously. So I think that there's a great opportunity, if you like, for Portugal in order to engage and further engage international investment.
Mm-hmm. Sorry. All right. Greg Purcell, who's with us, has asked, should a company pay agents... Sorry, I can't read your writing here, Arnold. Expenses to employees who are working from home. Sorry, light, heat and electricity. I think actually we'll just finish out the conversation very quickly before I answer that, Arnold, if that's okay. Pedro, there has been a lot of talk about the EU investment and the Portuguese government strategy for the future. What would your realistic take be on it for small to medium-sized enterprises?
Well, of course, these long-term plans from the government or from the European Union are quite important to define what is the country strategy, what are the trends. Those are guidelines for everybody in general. But if we focus on the small and medium-sized enterprises and businessmen, of course, this will not have a short-term impact. We are talking of 10 years programs, both of them, starting in the middle of next year. That will be spread over 10 years. So I think right now, of course, we should look into that. We should look to the trends that they are defining. Everything related, as we spoke about, digital transformation or sustainability, climate change, so environment, all that, of course, that's quite important to understand the infrastructures that we'll have in the future in the country that will allow us to do or not do this kind of business. That's all very important for our business decisions on the long term, but it's always a long term. I think nowadays people are very worried about the very short term, of course, and they should count with that on their strategy for the future, of course, but they should not count with that on the financial point of view. That will improve the economy, and it's not only the Portuguese economy, it's the European economy in general in the future, of course, that's the goal of those plans. But the impact on our daily small business or medium-sized business will not be overseen before 2 or 3 years. So we should have have an eye on it, of course, to understand what are the trends, where we're moving from. But we have to work on our own inside, let's say, on the fundamentals of our own companies and move forward on that basis, in my opinion.
Anything else?
I need to correct the statistic actually on the startups. Not 26.7, 267.3 million for startup incentives. So, but
correct to the right direction.
But I suppose just one final point is in relation to, I'm sure both Pedro and Susan have views as well, in relation to real estate as well, and where real estate is going. You know, I was surprised to read a commentator saying that there was a slowdown in Portugal, and you know, I found it quite remarkable that there was an increase in residential real estate in terms of pricing between July and August of 0.7%. You know, so I think the real estate space really is it's quite an exciting one and continues to be because we were talking as well, Susan, earlier about some of the opportunities, particularly in the tourism sector. For real estate opportunities to bring international investors in.
Yes, we in Portugal, what we're seeing is who are the investors that want to come here on this moment. Real estate, some prices are rising down, and some buildings nobody even hear about them because there are a lot of owners. But nowadays people are afraid of the today, what's going to happen tomorrow. So what's happening is some opportunities are coming to the market, not only on housing, because I want a bigger house, a different house near the ocean, near the sun, but also about if I'm going to invest to have a hotel in the next year, this is the right time to plan to buy the building because it's less expensive. You can invest and have the return 1 year later. Because use this time as a moment to make your right investments, because who has money now to invest? This is the right moment, not to have one investment, but maybe with the same amount to have two. Of course, this is being really positive, but there's a lot of things happening around. Some buildings and some spaces that never was opportunity, they're becoming to be. And if you look to the market in the next 2 or 3 months, the real estate is a really huge opportunity. So I believe it's going to happen a lot of things, and even with the European coming and help, a lot of other things will help with that. Pedro.
I have to say that most of the investment funds are changing their portfolio, and one of the let's say the trends are exactly real estate, gold, and other things. So if you look to real estate, Portugal in fact is an opportunity right now. So most of those investors are looking to us with a long-term perspective for investment, and we just need to take that opportunity, of course. And on parallel with that, also because you have the offer, but you have also the other side, which is all these top executives, as Jeffrey was saying, that are looking for the last 2 years, the last couple of years, looking to Portugal. They have their own networks, their inner circles that are communicating what is going on right here, quality of life and infrastructure. Let's say there's a lot of add value that the country can give to these people. And now with digital remote work, this is not an issue to be. Yeah. In fact, you are in Europe, so it's quite easy to set up your life. And with a good offer, for sure, you get both worlds together. So people that are in the real estate market are really facing this, and I think there's a huge opportunity to Portugal in the coming couple of years. Absolutely.
I think we're going to have to finish up there and go to our audience. Thank you all, but you're here to ask questions. Arnold, I'm going to start with this question that you gave me, and I'm going to give it to you, Pedro. So light, heat and electricity expenses for employees who are working from home, yes or no?
No. No, of course, you can only accept expenses in the company if they, of course, they are related with the activity, but they need to be on the name of the company, they need with the company NIF and so on and so on. So accounting-wise, it's impossible to accept. Tax-wise, impossible to accept this kind of costs. So companies can look for other kinds of, let's say, allowances to people to compensate them on that perspective, but not exactly on this kind of expenses.
And they need to be contractually allowed as well.
Yeah.
So.
And then I have a question, which is, Jeffrey, can you read these?
I will. Let's have a look.
Sorry, I have no glasses on.
We need a glass company here.
Okay. What does the panel think about commercial property offices? With people working from home, is there a need for such huge office spaces?
That's a little bit what I talked about, the office. If you have 100 meter squares that you need, now you need 50% of it. So why is 50%? Because now you need more for meetings, more for team building, more for creative areas, and not just chairs and tables. But don't forget that with COVID and the pandemic, when you had one place for one person, you need double place for the same person. So it's not just switch 50, it's 50, but has to be with safety. Yeah. So people are just thinking about, no, I'm going to just pick my office. No, and it's another nice opportunity. I didn't talk, and this question is really interesting, that I had some business friends that they said, no, I just closed the office, went to a co-working with other partners, and I'm paying 20% that I was paying, so I'm just taking off my expenses. So I think this is an opportunity, if you have a big office, to just redesign it and to make it a good effort for you, or just move and go for someplace else. That's why I'm saying real estate now is an opportunity for commercial areas and for office areas. I hope I answered the question.
I think so, very completely. The other one is from John, which looks like I may well answer, which is which startups and support is Jeffrey referring to? exactly.
They want all the magic.
Yeah, I know. It's, well, I would say, Invest Lisboa is one of the people you could ask. But certainly, there is a great, actually, pamphlet in Portuguese, which is produced, which I don't know, in fact, if it is in English. It's produced by the Ministry of the Economy and Digital Transformation. And it focuses on the startup support which is available. I'll give one example, which there's a fund, it's called Fundo 200 milhões, which is actually a fund of 200 million. And it provides technology startups and scale-ups with greater investment capacity in late seed and Series A and Series B phases. And this is with a minimum public investment of 500,000 euros. But there are others. For example, there's an extension of the startup voucher. There's startup human resources, which basically is financial support equivalent to the minimum wage per employee up to a total of or maximum of 10 employees. So there are a number of other measures available as well. Mezzanine is another one for startups, which is a loan convertible into share capital after 12 months. Average investment tickets are between 50,000 and 100,000 euros per startup. And also the incubators as well, which are available for each one of the startups. So there is not only these, but there, because these were measures which were brought in during COVID, there are also other complementary incentives which are available. If you do need any further information, you can contact me individually, or indeed, I know Invest Lisboa will have this information like that.
ICEP is also a really good connection to people that want to come to Portugal, because even in COVID time I was asking, because Conceptness wants to be in Canada, we want to open our office there since the beginning, and ICEP on the past, they answered me a different way. Nowadays they send me a list of 20 partners possible in Toronto. So what I say is the mindset of people change, and ICEP is a really good entrance and a really good way to people to make questions.
Definitely, a lot more dynamic. There's really looking to find solutions, basically positive, practical solutions for businesses, and they are geared really to having companies invest.
Businesses are working together, which didn't happen in the past, as is happening now, which is very important. I think the partnership, I just spoke about it. And from that you can perfectly prepare or set up new products, or products with more add value if you combine the knowledge of more than one organization. And that's something that's happening right now with this COVID situation effect. Not only in Portugal, but worldwide, I would say.
So any questions, Arnold?
No, that's it.
Okay.
That's it.
You're on time.
We either answered everything perfectly or we were really boring, one or the other. Anyway, in that case, I'm going to bring it to an end. It has been a pleasure to talk to my three fellow board members, Jeffrey, Pedro and Susan. Thank you for joining us on Zoom. I hope you found it of interest. Please do not hesitate to contact any of our board members if you have a question that you feel that they could answer or elaborate on from what they said earlier. And we look forward to having you at our next event. Thank you.